Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast, where we explore cutting-edge strategies to keep teams human-centered, drive innovation, and empower you with the tools and insights needed to help your team excel and thrive in today's rapidly changing world. Your host is Dane, a seasoned expert with over 20 years of experience in enhancing team dynamics and innovation. In today's episode, we have an inspiring guest, Dr. Esther Zeledon, who will be sharing her insights on creating a limitless life and making meaningful differences in leadership and teamwork. Dr. Zeledon has extensive experience leading governments, executives, communities, and individuals, helping them envision, strategize, and achieve their objectives. She specializes in building capability and expanding team capacity, ensuring that every team member contributes to a shared mission and vision. In this episode, you'll discover, first, the power of purpose. Understanding your purpose makes you a better team player and helps you appreciate your role in your organization. Second, why you should write your obituary today. Learn how this reflective exercise can provide clarity and direction for your personal and professional life. Finally, understanding your how-to approach. Discover how your unique way of working contributes to your value proposition and how to incorporate it into your resume to make it stand out. Dr. Zeledon will share her experiences and strategies for helping teams and individuals clarify their goals, overcome barriers, and create impactful plans. So, teamwork makes the dream work, and we're here to inspire your next collaborative breakthrough. Gather your team or put on your headphones, and let's dive in together.
Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast. My name is Dane, CEO of the Huddle 3 Group. And today I'm joined by Esther Zeledon from the Dominican Republic. So I asked this morning, where are you, Esther? And she said, I'm down in the Dominican Republic, so I'm jealous. The things that we're going to be talking about today, Esther and I, are really around her book. So she's the author of Creating Your Limitless Life, and also the work she does in business. So as president and co-founder of Be Act Change. So it's going to be cool to think about how we're helping teams lead, innovate, and inspire change, which I think we're all excited about. So welcome to the show, Esther.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
It's going to be really fun. So where would you like to start? What would help our listeners understand a little bit more about you and how you're showing up in the world and making a difference for teams?
Yeah. So I think the best background I can give is that I've always been a trailblazer. So maybe a lot of people can relate to that. I've always been the first. And I don't mean like the first in terms of like I have the cure for cancer or, like Einstein. Like we tend to think of just trailblazers in terms of the people who won Nobel Peace Prizes. But there's so many of us that are innovative, that are creative, right? That are maybe the first in their family to go become an entrepreneur. Maybe the first in their family to get out of poverty. Maybe the first in their family to study something other than being a doctor and a lawyer. Maybe the first to do something different, right? And that, for me, that's a trailblazer, right? You took a risk to go after what was aligned with you and your purpose. So I've always been that person, but I was always confined a lot in society, right? Like I was told to follow like the checkmark American dream and only do X things by X date, right? And that was never the intention of that. I think of whoever created the American dream man-made, but I think that's what it's become, right? That we all are these clones and we have to choose certain things and be a certain way. But I always fought against that. And I think that's something about my trailblazing attitude, right? Like I always wanted to fight against the societal social norms and also bring new ideas and continue evolving and growing. And I think that really ties into teams because when I went into the workforce, or even before that, right, when I made for teams, I think it was important for me, one, that I always saw was underutilized was the thing of listening. Like, like we always think about the hierarchy structure, right? You have a manager or you have employees or you have an organization. Like I was president of Latino organizations at graduate school, even as like a student,
Yeah.
right? And even then it's like, okay, leader, tell us what we're doing. No, this is not how this goes. It's I'm going to listen to all of you, once first individually, and then as a group, we need to come up with a shared mission and vision that we're all bought into, that we all want to do, and that works for us as a team, because we're a team now, but in 2-3 years, whoever's in here is going to be different, right? And so we need to evolve, right, with new ideas, new people that are coming in, right? New gifts that people bring, right? So it's always coming together, listening, and then evolving. And like I seen over time, whether I was doing something, volunteering, leading teams, or even when I led my own teams in the workforce, right? So as you know, for listeners, I became a diplomat. I grew a team from like 4 to 26, and I actually grew a team when things were, I had gone into this new country posting. So a diplomat, you move to different countries. And then this was like my third posting. This is when I felt comfortable, where I could be, hey, I'm going to do something different, the trailblazing, right? I did put my head down and didn't make waves for a while, as my parents always told me, don't be rebellious the whole time. But I was like, okay, now that I am in a position that, you know, a director, I wanted to shake things up a little bit in the sense of, we're going to build a team based on everyone's unique purpose. And I know you did an episode on that. Unique purpose and drive, but also shared mission and vision, right? Purpose, individual mission, vision is as a group. That we can create the team that makes sense for us right now. That we can have these visions and dreams and make a roadmap of things that where we want to go. And that is also of need of the constituents, beneficiaries that we were serving, right? So I was in diplomacy, but diplomacy in terms of humanitarian aid.
Got it.
And we created this, and we grew from 4 to 26. So it was like it was a great team of growth, and we grew it based on people that were aligned with the mission and vision that we were trying to create. And we grew from 700,000 to 100 million. Now, it may seem in terms of companies, right, a small amount of money, but at humanitarian aid, this was huge. It had never been seen before, but it was successful because it was based on listening internally to each other as a team, and also listening to our beneficiary constituents instead of going to a place, a community, and asking and going to them, oh, this is what you need. You know, I'm a scientist, I'm an economist. This is like, you need water, you need this. It was going, no. We are respecting that you have lived here. You know the knowledge. You are experts, even if you don't have a title. I don't believe titles your identity. And what can we, what do you want and need from us? And how can we help you? And then based on that, find that alignment on who can help and then serve, right? So we became, our team is that we're here to serve. And that has always been a core of me, because I studied originally, you know, I talk about my trailblazing, right? My parents pushed me. I'm an immigrant family, right? Pushed me to be a doctor. And I was like, I don't want to do that. But I really wanted to solve global problems. And at that time, what I saw that was a gap was like, at that time, environmental science. So when I was studying it, it didn't exist as a field. There was no one really doing it. There was no graduate programs on it. We knew climate change is a problem. And I was like, okay, I'm going to trailblaze and create the first program at my university and be the first graduate in it. But it's interesting because people are like, well, why, what you're doing now is not that. And I'm like, no, it is that, because it was about bringing people together to solve problems. Environmental problems cannot be solved alone. It's not having one type of scientist, one type of, you know, political representative. It's not about one sociologist, right? You have to bring everyone in the room. Everyone needs to come up and be consensus and want to move forward with this. And so for me, I'm like, it's the same thing. I'm just tackling a different problem in a different sector, but it's still the same skill set. And so for me, I've always been interested in that, because environmental problems are not silos, right? They're about people coming together and with enthusiasm and excitement and want to do good in this world, right? And that's something I've carried through with me. And that's where it leads me to now, where I've seen the power of when teams have that shared mission and vision. And I mean team in the general sense. It could be team in a business. It could be team in corporate. It can be team meaning community, country, couple, family, anything how you want to define team. I've seen when they actually are aligned in the mission vision together, right? And could come to this shared place, transformation is huge, you know, and I've seen it. But I've also seen when teams don't have that and don't have that appreciative inquiry, where they also become toxic, right? Either toxic work environments, toxic families, communities dysfunctional, you know, and I've seen both extremes. And so for me, it's such a passion now in my current role to help teams come into that place where they can have that productive, appreciative inquiry to lead them to the change that they want and create that motivation, inspiration, so we can all make the world a better place.
That's epic. And I've written a page and a half of notes already. And I'm spoiled for choice as far as where I dive in. You said some just amazing sound bites there too. And I love the title of your book, by the way. So, Chasing the American Dream, and you sort of pivoted to creating your limitless life. You scratched each of them out and aligning. What I'm excited by is the way you look at purpose as both individual and team and collective community. So you're looking at it on 3 stages almost. So maybe you can tell me a little bit more about, how that came to be, because most people just think about purpose in the company sense, and you're looking at it in a much more expanded setting.
Yeah, because, I remember I was always fascinated with purpose, right? But as a kid, I only saw that when it was written in books, it was find your purpose, but no explanation on how. And no explanation on how finding that leads to a collective power and good. And that was always something that it always was something that was unsettling for me, because I was always someone who cared about the world and environment. And every time I spoke about it, people would confuse it like, oh, but that sounds so selfish. That sounds so first world. And I'm like, I don't think so. I think there's something just missing in it. And so I made it almost like unintentionally, like my life work, even in my doctoral program. I remember I was doing like this study on like Nicaragua, because that's where I'm originally from. And I was looking at like land use, and they wanted me just to do a scientific analysis. And I'm like, we got to go talk to people. I'm like, I can't just do the science of it. I need to go and hear them and hear their stories. And that was my first time in actually going and practicing listening. And I was hearing from them, and they all had a vision. They all had this vision of what their life was. They all felt that they had a calling. And I was like, interesting. So that was the first time I was like, okay. And it was about a collective good. And I was like, so this is bigger than just the individual. And then I started unpacking that right through my work as a professor, then volunteering, and then coaching. I've always been coaching and mentoring my whole life. I started to figure out what was missing and studying the different models, right? There's the Japanese model on purpose, right? But it only has 4 parts. And I'm like, this doesn't feel complete either. And as I started playing with it, over time and through thousands of people, I realized that there was a commonality. So the commonality is like the purpose. I realized really what it came down to was how you solve problems and how you show up to the world. And that's where it becomes bigger, right? Because the purpose is tied to, okay, this is how I want to show up. This is how I want to give solutions, whether that's advice, whether that's innovation in a job, whatever that is. And so how do you unpack that for someone? What are the questions? And I can share that here on the show, the questions that I was able to unpack that leads that person to understand this is my how-to. But that how-to and then your legacy and everything is really tied after, talking to even small kids. Everyone in the beginning of life, even as a child, you want to save the world. And then, of course, you get jaded and, all these things happen to you. But that is the core, right? So then I realized it's not a selfish thing. It's not an individual thing. And so when you just reframe those same questions to either as a couple, a family, as a group, they're the same questions, but just in what do we, instead of how do we want to change the world? How do we bring our how-to together, right? And how do we, impact the world? What do we love? What are our traits, right? It's just changing it a bit. And then I had the chance to practice that with the team, right? With a team, with communities, with countries. And I realized this is how mission and vision comes out, right? And of course, I ended up studying like a little bit of psychology, change management, right? All those things. And I realized that's how the scales are, right? So it's basically like your individual how-to, then what is our mission is our group's how-to, right? Yes. And then legacy, personal, but vision of your 5 years when you want to go on a team is group, right? So all these things are transferable. But I think like I realize with the mission and vision, unless you do that as a team, that you help each person unpack their own, they can't do that as a group. And how I came to that realization was I was facing, as all Trailblazers do, so much resistance in the organization on listening. And I couldn't understand why. I'm like, this is a basic. But people, they feel constraints with time, with pressure, like deadlines, right? We all feel these real things, right, in the workforce and in business, right? We want to move on. We need outcomes and we need revenue. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but if we don't do this work, we're missing out on, we're actually not being as productive. We're not being as motivated. We actually don't know even what we're working towards. But I was
Yeah.
facing a lot of resistance. And at the end, I started just asking questions. Why are you resisting this? Like, what makes you uncomfortable about listening? And a lot of the responses was, well, my title has been, that's my identity. You're asking me as an engineer, an architect to go into a community and not offer that advice and go
Yeah.
quickly first into listening. And only if they need me, I bring that in. And then I start to be like, but why do you think your title's your identity? And that's just where you got trained, where you found that your how-to fits, but your how-to is much broader than that. And then the realization would come in and say, well, actually, I realized I've never been actually listened to, so I don't know how to listen. And that's when I realized the global stats, right? Only 20% of people know their purpose. Only 20% of people have actually done that appreciative inquiry and done the questions or been asked those questions. And then, of course, it's no surprise to me because none of the books ever said that. I mean, the closest was the Japanese model, but it was a lot more still about finding a thing that you could do every day, but not this higher, like this bigger thing.
It's more about flow, right?
It's more
the
about
Japanese
flow.
model.
And I started to realize, well, I guess that's no surprise on that, right? So that's why it led me to write this book. And the book was for me more about, let me just share that with the world. These are the questions you can ask yourself.
Yeah, let's do it.
I realized that it's like people have not been listened to. And so it's not their fault, right? It's just a bigger thing that we need to normalize, doing these questions for ourselves, doing these questions as a team. And then that way, that helps you when you're growing as a team too, because when you know what everyone's different strengths or gifts are, right? And because it's more than strength, right? What is the reason why they're there and how they fit into this mission vision? Then you know what are the missing gaps in that, and you can hire people that fill in those gaps and that are aligned with your mission vision. Because if people are aligned, you don't have to motivate them to be there. They're there because they want to be there. Because people always think, oh, people want more money, things like that. When it starts getting to that about the money and the little like negotiations over $1,000, it's because they can't see the higher value of being in that team. Well, there's people who get paid nothing and are in places because they feel moved by it. And so the challenge is creating that move where people feel that they are adding value, that they feel valued, and that they're part of something bigger. Right. And when people feel demotivated, it's because they don't know, like, what value do I bring in here? Or we create these hierarchies that we make people feel unvalued, right? Because we put them in these titles that don't even match, right, what they bring. So it matches with all of that. So for me, that's when that for me is the core, is the center of everything, and how I help people grow teams, and how people in all definitions of teams.
And I love the definitions of teams, and I want to come back and dive into your how-to questions, but you said it, I always say it, teams are the team at work, the sports team, the team at your church, your family, you name it, the local voluntary organization, and we're all part of so many different teams. But that point that you made there, that very few of us actually stop and listen, and even fewer of us actually set out our purpose, means that we don't know what we're bringing to the team, and also we don't know what the team has to bring to bear. So there's a huge amount of imperfection and sort of loss in every team, if that's the case.
Absolutely. And actually, that's what leads to a lot of the toxicity, right? Because if you don't know what your value you bring, that's what leads to the competition, to the looking at the person to the left or right, to fighting over titles and promotions, because you're attaching all value to that, rather than really looking at, is this aligned with me? And this is what I bring to the table, and having that confidence about it. And now it's funny because people ask me, well, don't you miss being a director time? I'm like, no, because that was great for that time. But I actually realized when I unpacked it for myself, my gift is different. And people always ask me, oh, but how are you so confident when you do consulting? It's not. I'm like, because I realize that my gift is helping unpack that. I don't need a title for that. And I don't want the title anymore, because that's not where my worth is. And I know what I bring to the table. So I don't believe in competition because we all bring something unique and different to the table. And that's not defined by where you sit in the hierarchy of an institution. Like for some people, sure, like you may have that or not, but everybody brings something. And I think that also changes that helps with peer-to-peer dynamics as well, because then you're not like, oh, this person can't be in this discussion because they're an admin. That's absolutely not true, right? They may not have had the opportunity yet to move in an organization, maybe learn their systems, but they already have a how-to that they've had since 7 years old. And you're missing out on the opportunity of not tapping into that and tapping into something that they can bring to that table. And it's the same thing internationally. And, so in I focus a lot on more humanitarian aid, but it's also like, stop decolonizing those structures too. Like, if you really want to help someone, you need to listen, because they probably bring a lot to the table that you may not have realized because you're using your mental models to judge them. And I've learned so much more. I've learned so much from fishermen, from people who like opening dive shops, more than I've learned from CEOs. And I'm not saying that CEOs don't have something to teach. Everyone has something to teach. But It's more like changing that mental model that you would only learn from the top down. No, there's so much learning peer to peer, from all different walks of life. I learned so much from taxi drivers when I travel. I ask them things. And I think it's changing that narrative. Like, everyone has something to teach us. So when you have a team, make sure you're tapping into everyone, because you'll be surprised on like what you can learn from them and from everyone around you. Even if you have a family, your own kids.
Yeah. At its very core, and I don't know if anyone shared this with you about your work, but at its very core, it's getting back to human nature. Is that fair? Is that
yes, absolutely. Yeah. Because we've created these man-made structures, right? And sure, you may have the technical training that's great for those positions. I'm not saying that they're great, and there's people who can bring people in together. But it's also recognizing that everyone has something to bring, and that the buy-in is important to get from everyone, right? There's always sometimes these structures where I'm only going to get buy-in from the board or the leadership team. And like, even in my own work, I make sure if I'm going to do mission vision with your team, it's with everyone. Everyone. We're not leaving the admin out. We're not leaving your PR person out. Like, everyone. Because everyone is part of that team. This is not a leadership thing. Like, and so, and I think that's a lot of the resistance. Sometimes I get like, people, what do you mean? Like, we want to dictate, and it's like, but you're missing out. Like, you have to get them involved, because they are the ones who are going to execute. And you may be having blind spots and missing out on great potential. So that's a deal breaker on my end. Because there's so much great stuff that come out from everyone. And especially like even in community work, like I'm sure there's a lot of people that there are a lot of the businesses, or you have a nonprofit or something, right? You need to also talk to your beneficiary, whether it's a consumer, whether it's a client, whatever. Make sure that you're also sharing with them and getting feedback on your mission vision. Do they understand you that way? Is there something else that maybe you're not seeing even internally that you do, that you may not even know? And I have that same exercise as a person in their own purpose, right? Because you may I have this exercise, you have to write your obituary. And what would people say? Yeah. Right? And a lot of people, they get really uncomfortable. But you're supposed to make you uncomfortable, because you're reflecting on realizing that when you're dying, that people are not talking about your title or your job. People are talking about how you made them feel and the impact you had, whether it was at work, whether it's at home, whether it's whatever teams you were in. That's how people are coming into that.
That's powerful. And you mentioned Nobel Prizes earlier, but that was the pivotal inception moment of the Nobel Prize, wasn't it? Because they thought he'd died, not his brother who had died. And so he read his own obituary, and it was something like the Merchant of Death, because the Axo Nobel brand was providing dynamite and explosives. So he created the Nobel Prize. So that's a perfect example of why we should be writing our obituaries and thinking about the impact we leave.
Exactly, because then you realize that you've been having impact already. But a lot of times, like, we're super self-critical of ourselves. We don't realize the impact we're having. And so I have like a ground truthing. I'm a scientist, right? So I'm like, ground truth it. You're going to write it, but then you're also going to text 5 friends and ask them the impact, and ask them 3 questions, and see what they tell you, and see if you have a blind spot, right? And that's the same exercise as a team too, right? Even if you come up with your own mission vision, ask the people you're impacting, and if they agree, or what do they think the impact you've had on them or on the service, right? I mean, like, again, these questions can all be changed a little bit to what you're delivering as a team, as an organization, whatever team means, and ask them. And you're going to see there's going to be a lot of similarities of what you already said, but there's also going to be
Yeah.
something probably you're missing. And that's why, I mean, it takes a collective to understand this, right? Because you need to understand from the people who are you're serving, and that's serving is very broad, and also what you think as a collective you are, but having those points where you get the full picture. And then that gives, then you're impacting on a much greater scale. But even understanding like that as an individual, as a family, as a company, as a group is key. And it all comes down again to listening, right? I mean, that's what you're doing. You're asking people questions, right? You're listening and asking for feedback. But it's something that you would think it's so basic, but so many institutions and places, it's revolutionary because they don't want to take the time. And it's time.
Yeah.
But there's a way to do it in a way that you can do it in a way systematically that it doesn't have to take so much time. You could do it in a couple of days, but just that little pause and reflect and taking that initial thing will save you so much anguish long term.
And it drives an awareness that we go through life with so little awareness.
Yes.
Period.
Yep.
So if you start saying no to things and you start listening, you're making time and space to be more aware. And to your point, you're going to show up in your how-to because that's innate, that's natural. So that's a really cool call to action for everyone because we all feel it, right? We're all overburdened, overworked. It's not just during the day when we're in front of our computer or in front of a manufacturing line. It's also when we go home and on the weekends. So in our communities, we need to drive more of that awareness of self and other and planet.
Yeah, and bring back our childhood because, I've done this with kids. Yeah. 7-year-olds are super clear.
Yeah.
They know what they bring. They know how they interact with their friends. They know how they want to change the world, everything. But by fourth grade, kids are confused.
Yeah.
Because society, their parents, and all the noise, and that happens with all the teams that we're in whatever team definition. Yeah. Because we get all this other noise and distractions of what it needs to be, what we should be, how it should, function. And we forget those, things that we were innately had or that comes out and that we're not afraid to explore and showcase. And so I have found that fascinating because people are like, oh, but kids are too small. I'm like, they're not. At 7, they know. And so it's just helping them, like as students, just even in 4th graders, just reminding them again. And then students in college be like, hey, let me remind you, let me refresh it. And as adults, taking them back. And so many adults are like, I don't remember my childhood. But there's ways to reframe it. If you don't remember your childhood, there's questions to put it at present time that can give you that clarity. But
I
yeah,
like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. And remind me, were you introduced to me by Ernesto Ciroli?
Yes.
That's right. I see so much brilliance in your work and his.
Yeah. And we got connected because someone else heard me speak and they're like, you got to meet Ernesto.
Yeah. Because his whole shut up and listen TED Talk, and he did the exercise with us in one of our group gatherings where we started with who were you at 9 years old and what did you do?
Yeah. No, we have.
And funnily enough, I think as a 9-year-old, I was the kid that ran around and tried to get other kids to come together and create a game because I like playing and I like getting people together to play games.
Exactly. It's funny.
That's cool.
Yeah, well, that's how we met. Somebody was like, you have to meet Ernesto. And it's true. We have like full alignment. Mm-hmm.
I love it. So there's some questions. There's an exercise then in how you discover your how-to. Do you want to walk through that?
Yeah, let's do it on the spot. So, I mean, there's like 8 parts of the whole fleshing out of purpose. And that's all in the workbook and book. And I have those for 99 cents for a reason on ebook because I don't want anyone. I was a kid that grew up with no money, paycheck to paycheck. I never want financial anything. So it's a no-brainer. You download, you do the questions, and
awesome.
And the workbook's in a journal format because we've forgotten how to journal. We've forgotten how to do stuff like that because we didn't do it since we were kids. And this is a way of going back a little bit to that childhood and like 15 minutes a day, just do the prompts without having to think about what's right. So we'll do one here. Okay, cool. If you had $10 billion. And if 10 billion is too small for you, we can do unlimited
10 billion.
resources. Okay.
That's huge.
Some people are like, I don't know. That feels restrained. So whatever unlimited amount of money you want to do. What global problem would you solve?
Oh, that's great. I would rethink the community center. That's where I would go, because growing up in different countries and different places, community centers were a bit sad and tired. There were lots of well-intentioned people, but it was really where you went if you were bored and there was nothing better to do. But I think our community centers should be far more vibrant and exciting. And I think people should be coming together, to your point, to share their how-tos and understand, what mission-driven work they can all be doing together to improve their way of life as a community.
I love that. And okay, so the G7's like, I love that. I'm going to give you the money to do it. Now, but they need your plan. So how are you going to do this? And it's okay if you don't know the full how, but how are you going to figure out the how to do this?
I love it. I'm going to start with the team. I'm a teamwork guy. So I'm going to, as soon as I get some money, I'm going to take a piece of it and go out and find the greatest minds on community building. And I'm going to pull them together and ask what they love to do and how we could do more of it in a constrained environment to create a pilot community center.
And then from the pilot?
Then from the pilot, we're going to have to do some research. So we're going to have to do some community engagement, go out and listen, to your point, and understand how people interacted with it, what they would have done differently, what they loved, what it's helped them to do. And I would take those learnings and use that to recruit other people, to build playbooks, to seek more funding, to identify the next project. I think that would be my flow.
Nice. That's awesome. So to me, that sounds super aligned with you and what you're doing here in the podcast and everything. So now think about your personal life. Like if someone told you they had a problem, would you use that same approach? Would you look for, so if they said, hey, like I am starting this business and I need to get money and capital, what should I do?
So give them 10 billion and say, what do you do first?
No. Like they're asking you for advice. Would you tell them would you use that same framework? Or you had a problem at work, would you first, or you had a big project you were given.
Good point.
Would you first look for experts, seek experts out and then create a team to do it together? Would you use the same approach?
I would, but that might not suit them, because finding experts might be the last thing that they want to do.
So you would first listen to them?
I would have to listen to them, because if I give them my playbook, I make this mistake all the time with my wife. She's like, I've got this business idea. And I'm like, well, I would do this and this and this. And she's like, well, I don't want to do any of that, so I'm not going to try.
But if you were given that project, another project, would you follow the same approach?
Me, I would always follow my approach.
Yeah. Okay. So that's your how-to, right? Yeah. But I do like the listening part that you said, because then that would be maybe in if you were to flesh this out, right? It's a whole question, right? So the second question I would be, ask to your personal life and make an adjustment, right? So how you approach problems, because I think you've already, when you answered the question about community center, you've probably already done some research. You've already been listening to people. So you might have already done that step. And then the next one was team, right? So then when you do the adjustment is, oh, wait, I would actually first listen. And then before I make the team, right? So these questions kind of build on each other, but then you understand that is my how-to when I approach problems, whether in my personal life or professional life. And that's what I bring to the table. I know how to I know how to listen. I know how to research. I'm great at creating the best teams out there to solve complex problems, right? That is your unique you. And that's what you bring to the table. And the order is your order, right? Of how you do each step. And no one answers that how-to the same.
So why, maybe this is a little bit of an overstep, but why are we relying on resumes and not building how-to frameworks for every individual out there?
Actually, that's what I help people with. I actually reframe their entire resumes and CVs based on their unique value add. I call it actually the personal branding. It's not your title. It's I XXX, right? Whatever that is on their how to, and then examples. The three big categories, like let's say, like if it was research and team building, right, and listening, right, it would be those three categories, how you've done it, impact statements, how by doing that, the impact you've created in all those three jobs. And that's it. And I have found that even in this hierarchy system of old resumes, those resumes stand out because the person is clear on what they bring to the table. Right. And like it's clear on this is how this person is going to. And then you frame your cover letter. Like, I see that you could utilize my how to, and this is how I can help solve this problem. Boom. You nail it, because this is what people are trying to get out of interviews. And actually, like, since we also have like HR, right, that listens to this call, I have challenged and changed like how we recruit people. Like I was one that changed the way we did job advertisements. Like, I don't need someone with 3 to 5, 10 years. I would question and say, why are you asking that question? Like, what do you hope to gain out of someone with more experience? Like, is that really needed? Right. In some cases, as part of listening, some of them might be like, yes, because I need someone with more of the technical. But some other cases, like, I don't know, I have that. Right. And it's that questioning, that inquiry, like, do we really need that? Or are we really looking for someone who is a team player, or someone who can collaborate, or someone who's really organized, or someone's planner? Like, what are we really looking to supplement this team? And another thing I have on my purpose diagram, that's something that I didn't see in anyone's, and something that actually, like, in understanding this, is that you understand the gaps that you need in a team, is I have in the workbook is, what have you overcome and how? Because one thing that's not talked about is that the other side of purpose is the vulnerability of your purpose. So like in my example, my superpower is like, my first thing is I identify what moves that person, right? Like, that's my first thing on my how to, is purpose, right? And so, and then how do we come together? And that's, I'm always like, oh, I have any problem, I'm like, what is your purpose? How can we come together on something shared? I know we may have like 100 differences, but there must be something, we have some shared commonality. And how do we move forward with that, right? And that's mine. So, but the weakness side of it, like what have I overcome and how, is that sometimes I stay in things too long where I shouldn't be. And because I want to see that transformation all the way through, right? And that's like something it's the people pleasing, right? All that, because I want to see it. That's a weakness, right? And so I need someone to balance that has the superpower of being like, I'm no nonsense, and I'm really good at, someone else in the team, like, really good at prioritizing on what makes sense right now, right? So when I have a team, I had a deputy that worked under me. I needed someone who could do that and could do conflict management, like in the terms of conflict management, in terms of like say no right from the beginning and help do that filter. And I would do like the visioning, bringing together in, right? But by knowing what makes you vulnerable helps you also understand your own blind spots and what you need help with, and what you need a friend like to help you with, or a mentor or a coach or someone in your team to balance that. So for me, that was a key part in that purpose formula, is like, what have you overcome and how? How do you incorporate that into your everyday as an individual? And then when you look at it as a team, how do we see, do we have enough balance in the team for these things, or who are we missing? And that who we're missing, that's who we need to hire. So it's not based on years of experience, whatever, right? Not on a cookie cutter criteria, but more like more in depth. Like, and then when we in those questions, those are the questions we're asking. Like, do you fit that? Do you have that? And it's more clear to the reader, because I see so many job openings that are like 10 years and vague and this. That doesn't say anything. And then they hire the wrong person, and then they blame that. And then sometimes you go into these roles, and it's happened to me. And you're like, wait, I thought it was this. Now I'm unclear my response. But you start to doubt your value, and it had nothing to do with it. They were looking for something else and not being very clear on it. So like, that's one advice I have, is like, be very clear on that skill that you're missing in that team, on top of whatever technical thing you think that actually fits in what you need, and be clear on that for the person and for you.
I love that. And I would probably just throw a watch out there that we should avoid the word skill, because the industry right now is hard focused on moving to skills-based hiring. And that's the wrong shift, because we don't actually understand the skills. To your point, the how-tos aren't skills. They're a way of working. They're a way of showing up.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting as a recruiter and as someone who goes to a lot of talent conferences, it's interesting seeing where we think we're solving the problem, but we're not. We're just creating a new layer of distortion.
Exactly. And yeah, exactly. I love that. And I'm 100% aligned with that. Like, I don't like skills. I don't like, the word even soft skills for things that are related to your how-to. We need to get rid of that. Listening is not a soft skill.
No.
Neither is facilitating,
Agreed. Yeah, they're hard. So I'd actually written down, funnily enough, here earlier when you were talking about it, I said move from skills-based hiring to will-based hiring. Because if someone wants to be part of something, wants to show up in a certain way, whether they've got a year of experience or 100, that they're going to be the right fit for the team.
Exactly. Yeah. Because we're not motivated by these metrics. When we start following that, that's why I have the Chasing the American Dream crossed out. We start following that, it's because we've lost that larger motivation. And it's not saying that monetary is not important, but when it becomes your only factor, that's a red flag. Like, you've lost the bigger picture.
It throws up a lot of dust.
Yeah, and then when you get it, you're not happy. I mean, I've been there. Once you get that promotion, get that money, and I've worked with people on that. They're like, I don't understand. I always wanted VP, and I have it, and I have the money, and I'm super unhappy because that was the wrong metric. It's like, it's more about, is this the place where I can impact? Is this the place where I can make a difference, where my how-to fits?
And there was that study recently that was talking about loneliness and how I think Americans 33% less connected to their community members.
Exactly. And
which is scary.
It's scary. And like, we've lost, like what you said, like, we're human beings. We want community, right? And then when we create those structures and those metrics, we lose it, because then we're all just competing. And like, when we think about, I say this a lot, but I think that even starts in the home. Like, I talk about Thanksgiving and Christmas, right? So many people are lonely but don't want to go home. And the reason is because when you go home, what happens? People ask you about your weight. People ask you about your partner. People ask you about promotion. And they're all metric oriented. And instead, no one asks. So I did like a survey out. And with like, top execs and also people just living around the world. And I'm like, what is the question you're like, have you ever been asked this one question, right? And everyone's like, no. Well, no one ever asks anyone about what are your highest aspirations.
Yes.
We don't ask people that. And then like,
why is that?
And what do you want to be sought out for? Because just because you're good at something doesn't mean you want to be sought out for it, or that's aligned with your purpose. Like, so think about, if I like purpose, mission, vision, right? That means I'm really good at organizing events.
Yeah.
Now, what happens? I was always pulled in for birthdays and parties and things like that. Now, that's something I realized after doing this work, I don't want to do. Like, as much as I enjoy that, that's not aligned with me. My purpose is about bringing people together to share ideas and change the world. But I don't want to use my event skills for the other thing. And I think I had to shift my community from that and say, it's not that I don't love you. I love you guys. It's not a rejection, but that's not what I want to be sought out for. I want to be sought out for events that bring community together, which is what I do now. But I think like understanding that about yourself too, because sometimes we're like, well, that since I'm good at it, that's what I have to do, or what I have to bring to a team. It's also setting expectations of communication. Say, hey, I'm good at that, but that's not what I want to be sought out for. I want to be sought out for this that maybe you guys haven't seen yet, but I also bring to the table.
I love that. I'm going to build some of that in. It's interesting because in my career, I've spent a lot of time connecting people to the right teams. And now I'm getting this unique opportunity to help them be their best version of themselves in the teams they're in. And that feels so much more exciting. But I could have easily just kept doing the connecting and retired one day at 70 and in theory had a successful career, but not felt as fulfilled or felt like I really showed up the way I wanted to. So I love that kind of invite to be aspirational. But
I like that because that's really aligned with your answer to me, right? Like for you, it's not just about creating the community center. Like you said, the community center has to be vibrant and it has to be functional. And like, you know what I mean? So that makes sense. It's not for you enough just to connect.
Correct.
So to me, that's super aligned with what you're saying and your how to, like the vibrancy has to be there. And I could see how that ties to an individual or to a center.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
that's neat. Who knew I was getting a free workshop today? Thank you.
Yeah.
I love it. So I've got a question for you,
Yeah.
tying back to that metrics, because, and I can't remember the source, but I listened to a great podcast once that said, have you ever noticed how blue collar workers don't turn up and ask what you do for work or what job title you're in? They're talking about the football, or they're talking about the kids or the beach or the weather or whatever. But white collar knowledge workers, it's one of the first questions we ask. So what do you do for work?
Yes.
So where do you see the origins of that? And maybe even a deeper question, are our community members who are working in more blue collar trades and roles being given the opportunities to be aspirational, and you know, where does that all sort of play out?
Yeah. Well, I would first say that purpose and aspirations are everyone. You know, as I remember that I was always told that it was like only for white collar, first world, you know, and you know, when I grew up, Patriots Fetch, they were like, "Oh, Esther, you're dreaming," and that's whatever. And that's not true. And like, and after traveling all around the world, I was telling you, like fishermen, people in villages, everyone has an aspiration. Doesn't matter what level you're in. Now, that's interesting about the study, and I could see how it's true, because once let's say there's two people. There's people who have like that's why I always use the American dream, because that's what I know the most, right? What I studied, right? Yeah. But like the American dream, right? The model, you follow it and you make it. So when you're told, oh, I made the American dream, so now my whole worth is my title, and society has applauded you for that and given you all validation in that. So of course, that's how you know that's what you're going to ask people. Like, what is your job? What is your title? Right? All the metrics that you were taught as measures of success. And those are the things that you're going to ask. Now, the other group that didn't make the American dream, it's that confusion inside, right? Like, I still have an aspiration, but I didn't make those check marks, or I didn't want to do it, right? And I didn't want to go into that race. So I'm going to connect with people. We all human beings, we want to connect, right? So you connect in a different way. But I wouldn't say, though, that the blue collar doesn't have aspirations, it doesn't want to be asked those questions. Like anybody who I've asked in all types of blue collar jobs, when they get asked that question, they're like, oh, thanks for asking me that question. Like no one asked, and they all have it. That's why I love talking to taxi drivers and Uber drivers.
Yeah.
Because they tell me all their crazy dreams, and we talk the whole hour right about them and where they want to go and what they want to do. And then a lot of them also like, I also talk to a lot of immigrant communities, and some of them are like, I don't know why I came. Like maybe I should have stayed over there. And like, I think it was like a safety net. Like I came because I thought this is my easy way to do my aspiration, but maybe I should have just stayed where I was and grown it there and had the confidence to grow it there. Right? There's always these mixed feelings about that, which has been also interesting to hear and learn. But I think it's that difference between I made it or didn't make it. But I think both suffer the same thing, because I've had clients that have excelled, or even I was that person, exceeded the American dream. I was so unhappy. And then I completely blew my life up, and I was like, I don't want it anymore. I'm like, it's dead. Goodbye. I don't want it. I'm changing my life because I don't want any of those metrics. I don't want to own a house in one place. I want to have fluidity and live in two different places. I think that's what we asked before we talked. I'm like, no, I don't have one place I live. I don't have any of those metrics anymore. And I like it. But I mean, that was me, where I was like, I had that and I was like, why am I still unhappy? But it wasn't based on my aspirations at all. It was based on a societal metric. And then I have people who haven't made it that feel this frustration that they're not loved and accepted by their community because they haven't made it, right? Or they're constantly compared to people who have made it, or they're pushing that metric down to their children. They're like, you have to make it for us, right? And
which is a big problem.
It's a dangerous
in
thing
our society
of pushing in those unmet purposes onto your children or metrics, right? And
Yeah.
and it's coming back to the same thing is, wait, no, there's no such thing as you made it or not made it. What was your aspiration? I'm sure
Yeah.
you're showing up every day as that. Let's revive that. And then
Yeah.
what is the path you want to take? And that's why I have it I use my slogan, creating your own limitless life, because your own limitless life is yours. It may not be tied to money. It may not be
Yeah.
tied to those metrics. It's tied to, are you able to fully bring out your how to every day in your circle? And then if you're not, how do we create that space that you can in wherever you're at? Because you can do 100 different things in your life. And it's just opening that mindset of, no, you can do 100 different things, whatever you want. You could completely
Mm.
change your life in 5 years if you want to. And but remember, what is your aspiration? Are you ready to go after it and give yourself permission to? And it may just mean on a scale of your community, your circle, or it could be global, right? That's unique to you. But there is no like cookie cutter path or success, because even those that have made that standard American dream context, if they're not living out their how to every day, they're in the same spot as anyone who hasn't. That's not the metric.
Yeah. No, this is neat. This is super neat. I can't believe we've already run out of time. I could sit here all day. There are some great ways to sort of touch on key points through this conversation. So listening and the power of listening, the fact that teams and teaming is going on everywhere. You're not just part of one team. I love the aligning with your mission and purpose for transformation, particularly in a community or a larger setting than just the organization. Because let's be honest, all organizations exist in service of other organizations and communities. So we need to think about that transformatively. I thought the how-to framework was brilliant. Like that was my takeaway from today personally. You gave me a gift there, so thank you. And this whole conversation about what aspirations do you have, it's a great way to get back to being human and to just the nature and the natural world and the opportunities that we all have in front of us. So I thought they were all great sound bites, and I'd also missed the balance. I like kind of that Johari window-esque kind of, if this is who you are and how you show up on the team, who else do you need on the team? So tons of cool stuff. It sounds like I've got to go and grab the book and work through it, and so will many of our listeners. How do we find you, the book, Be Act Change?
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn, Esther Zeledon on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram. Instagram, I have it a lot more fun, right? It's a different audience. So I'm on Instagram, they're on LinkedIn. And then my book's on every single bookstore you can think of that's relatable to you. If you're a Barnes & Noble person, if you're an independent bookstore person, if you're an Amazon person, you can get the ebook for 99 cents, or the soft cover, hardcover is also there, available for print and sale. But I definitely recommend the workbook. If you don't have time to read, at least download the workbook and do the inquiry and the prompts. It's really easy to follow, and it gives you that clarity and just an understanding of yourself that then you can show up in the way that you want to. Yeah.
No, I love that. I'm going to actually have some of my team do that. So I'll circle back with you, Esther, and let you know how we went.
I would love that.
Before today, I thought my 3 ingredients for teamwork were fresh ideas, shared leadership, and clarity. And now you've helped me add aspiration
into
that mix. So the Venn diagram is growing, and thank you for that too.
Awesome.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to staying in touch. Thanks, Esther.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Remember that by embracing vulnerability, trusting our intuition, and approaching challenges with compassion, we not only strengthen our teams, but also pave the way for a future where collaboration thrives. If you're hungry for more insights, strategies, and research on collaboration, head over to thefutureofteamwork.com. There, you can join our mailing list to stay updated with the latest episodes and get access to exclusive content tailored to make your team thrive. Together, we can build the future of teamwork. Until next time.